Okay, in this video, we're going to cover how to bring something like a base mesh that you've made in another program, like this simple shape I've made inside of 3ds Max, or this one I made in ZbrushCoreMini. So let's go ahead and start back in Max. Okay, so here we go. First thing I want to really show you watching this is that I want to show you kind of how unoptimal this shape is. Like, obviously, this is just an assemblage of simple primitive shapes, some of which I've slightly modified. So you can see the ears. I used a symmetry modifier to copy the one ear to the other, and an FFD modifier just to kind of push and squash a sphere to get more of that ear shape. Now, I will say, the longer you spend on creating your base mesh inside of Max or ZbrushCoreMini or whatever program you like, the less work you'll probably need to do inside of ZBrush. So just keep that in mind. Like right now, this shape isn't great, if I'm honest. Wow, you can clearly see I'm trying to create a bit of a horse head, horse looking shape. It ain't great. Like, it's okay, but here, all of these are separate objects still. Just a sphere, a couple of cylinders, a couple of spheres kind of thrown together. I'm noting that, I want to note that on purpose so I can show you that if I wanted to spend a little more time on it and actually model something shaped like a horse head as all one shape, then I could literally just bring it into ZBrush and start, sculpting details on it. The example that I have in the older video, I'm using ZBrush Core, that's essentially what I'm doing. But this one, because we have access to full ZBrush, let's use some of those amazing tools, right? Let's make a reason why we want to use ZBrush versus ZBrush Core, and that is because of some of the cool things it can do. So all I need to do is I need to export this. Now, notice that you have options between export and export selected. I have nothing selected, so export's going to select everything in the scene. Export selected, if you have more than one object and you want to only export one thing, would be what you would use it for. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go down here to OBJ. Now, it's not the only file format, but OBJ is pretty much one of those universal file formats that almost every 3D program will work with. You'll notice that ZbrushCoreMini doesn't export or import OBJ files. If you can find the older Sculptress, it actually would support those. And even free programs like Gmax have plugins that allow you to import and export OBJ files. So I'm just going to call this Horse Head 3DS. And save. When this pops up, I can do preset ZBrush. Okay. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I recommend it because it's going to flip your Y and Z axis. So 3ds Max, if you remember, Z is the up axis. Inside of ZBrush, the Y is the up axis. So by clicking this, it'll automatically flip it to be compatible without having to do more work. The other thing is, make sure before you export, the best thing you can do to save yourself a whole lot of headache is to make sure whatever model you have is zeroed out. So let me go ahead and make sure that mine's zeroed out. So X, I want to, you can see it's a little off. There, before I do that, let's maybe go ahead and just attach these objects. Actually, I think it'll probably be fine, but if your objects aren't perfectly zeroed out inside of 3ds Max, when you bring it over to ZBrush, it can sometimes cause a little bit funkiness. Now this one's a little bit difficult because you can see the center point is not in the middle. So what I can do is I can just make sure that this thing is centered all out and attach all those objects. Kind of an easy way to do it. So just right click on this and you can see it's pretty darn close. So it might not even give me any issues. There, it's zeroed out. It's moved it down a bit, so I'm going to hit Control Z, and I'm going to leave the Z axis fine because the up and down value is not going to really matter. The other thing I'm going to do this, I've added the Edit Poly modifier just because I grabbed the points and pulled them in a little, but because I've added that modifier, we can actually attach everything. So while it's not entirely necessary to attach everything, I'm going to go ahead and do that. You can even convert this over to editable poly, so flatten it all down. That's to make sure that all my elements are zeroed out. Again, I want it to be at the 0 point, so my left and right symmetry values don't get messed up in ZBrush. This is something that I found out later. In ZBrush, you can fix a model that is not centered, but it's a lot more work than it needs to be. So we're going to call this horse head 3ds and save. Again, I'm going to go ahead and pick that ZBrush preset and export and done. So here's my model. Again, all I really did was attach them and make sure that it's right in the middle, and then I can bring it out. I'm going to show you, here is a model I did. I was just playing around with inside of ZbrushCoreMini. So you can see you can do this in multiple programs as well. So with this, I'm going to, let's see, where are we at? Export for 3D printing. There it is. And we'll say 3D print. We'll do horse head. And you can see it's going to export it as an OBJ. So let me hit save, and we should be good to go. I don't even need to save that. Let's go ahead and pop over to primary ZBrush. So if this is the first time you're running the software, often the lightbox will be open. It's okay, you can close that just by clicking lightbox. Also, there's a big pop-up that has advertisements in it, just like ZbrushCoreMini, it's the same pop-up. You can just close that as well. So once we close the lightbox by clicking lightbox and close that pop-up, you should have something that looks just like this. And this is just a default installation of ZBrush 2023. Now, I'm going to come over here and click import. Now, I will say this, the full version of ZBrush has a ton of tools. It's kind of like 3ds Max in the way where it has so many things in it, it can feel a little overwhelming. One of the reasons why I often recommend students to check out ZbrushCoreMini or Zbrush Core is because the interface is simpler and a little less intimidating. But forgive me, with Max on, buying ZBrush and changing the pricing structure, it kind of just makes sense to get the full version. So here we go. Here are the two ones I've exported. Here's my horse head from 3ds Max and my 3D printing horse head from ZbrushCoreMini. I'm going to go ahead and do this one first because my 3ds Max one's going to need a little bit of zhuzhin before it's ready to really be able to be used. So let's open this guy up. And now to create it, to edit it, I'm going to click and drag. Now this is the weirdest thing ZBrush does. This program was originally created as a 2D art program, so you have to go into edit mode in order to edit your 3D models. The ZBrush Core, ZbrushCoreMini have removed this. But again, this program's been around a long time. Old timers aren't going to want to change, so you have to remember to do this. If I don't click edit mode immediately after creating my shape, it's going to keep drawing unicorn heads. It's very weird, but it's to create like 3D, 2.5D depth maps, essentially. It's very strange. All you gotta do is click edit, and you never have to worry about that. Now it's gonna work just like what you're used to from ZbrushCoreMini or ZBrush Core. And you can see, there it is. There's my model. I'm ready to kind of add some more sub levels underneath geometry. If I click divide, it's going to divide the mesh and make it more complex. Now, up here, you can see there's a little button, Activate Sculptors Pro Mode. That's going to work more like how ZBrush Core or ZbrushCoreMini really works, where it automatically adds triangles where it needs. Okay, this one will actually change the geometry and increase it. You can see now this model is 1.5 million. The lower resolution of the model, here's 67,000, the more deep the changes are going to be. Also, you'll see symmetry is not turned on by default. I'll turn that on by hitting X. So now I can start really modifying this and using it just kind of how we would inside of ZBrush Mini or ZBrush Core, and kind of changing and editing and modifying this thing as much as we like, right? So here, again, if we go up a subdivision level, we'll have more detail, or I can make stronger changes. Now you'll notice there are all kinds of more tools as well. For the most part, I use the same tools that are really in the ZBrush Core Mini because those are the most used tools. So you can see if you want, you can actually hit a button on the keyboard and go to M, and it'll hide everything except for M. So you can go to the Move tool if you want to use the Move tool, which again is probably one of the best tools for editing and modifying. And I'm just holding down Shift to smooth it out. That's one of those key commands you kind of really have to work with. Now you'll notice the interface is a little different. It's not just like ZBrush Core Mini, but most of the items are in the same spot and work kind of the same way. Up here at the top, you can see here's for painting and color. Here's for editing the geometry, Z add or Z subtract. Here's how intense or how strong that tool will work. Here's the same thing, but for coloring, when you go to color your objects. Draw size is going to change the size of your brush, and focal shift is going to change kind of how harsh or sharp those edges are. Okay. Again, if I change to a tool like, I don't know, clay buildup, you can really kind of see the effect of this. So here it is. And if I are to change the size or the focal shift, you can see the edging is harder. If I change focal shift the other direction, you can, man, it's barely doing anything. It's so blurry, huh? Okay, you can see this one really requires a little bit more on there to start seeing some options. But you can see here now I'm making in some more subtle changes. All right. Again, I can decrease the intensity and start making again those subtle differences if I want. All right. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a picture of a unicorn right in front of me, so I'm kind of just guessing on all this. All right, but here you go. Now, again, there are a lot of really great training tutorials and stuff for ZBrush. For this one, we're just kind of covering the basics, and I want to show you the importing options. So let's go ahead. I'm going to click a cylinder for this one, just so that way we're not having to mess with that horse. And I'm going to click Import, and I'm going to import that other horse model. Open. Now, this model was made in Max. It's made with quads and triangles. It's not going to like all those things, so it's going to say, hey, do you want to keep quads and triangles, or do you want just triangles only? What do you want to work with? It does, for this, it's really not going to matter so much. In fact, we're going to play with it a little bit in a minute anyway. But here we go. Now you can see it looks like technically my piece came in backwards. Also, look at the bottom there. Ooh, ugly business. You can see ZBrush did not like that very much at the bottom. Again, those n-gons don't really come in very well. We could try undoing it and import it again. And for this one, we'll do triangles. Let's see, there you go, much better. All right. Okay, so here's my model. Now, these are still separate components. If I were to smooth them out enough, you can see they'll separate out, right? These are not one shape. They are all individual pieces, okay? And I'm just hitting Control-Z to undo that, all right? So I'm going to need to turn this into something that's going to be a little bit more user-friendly. So we're going to play with some of our amazing tools. For this one, I'm going to use Dynamesh. Dynamesh is a tool you can use to combine meshes together. So that's exactly what I want here. Like, this looks like a great shape, but I brought this from Max. It's all these different pieces. This thing's no good to work with, even though the shape looks good. So I'm going to go to Dynamesh and play around with it. Now, under resolution, that's going to be how complex the new mesh is. The higher resolution, the more it's going to look like this, but the more dense the mesh is going to be. I probably don't need that, so I'm going to leave that where it is, or adjust it as necessary after I test it out. Let's just click Dynamesh and see what we get. So you can see it's jumped a little bit more for active points. We're at 22,000 where originally we were at 570 points. I could drop this down if I wanted to and make an even simpler mesh. It might be too simple though. We'll keep it at 128. That looks pretty good. Again, it's not great. It's not perfect. So when you're creating this mesh, keep that in mind, that Sometimes it does require a little playing with it till you're happy with what it looks like. Okay. I'm going to click Dynamesh again to turn it off. Now here is my new model. However, it doesn't look perfectly symmetrical and it needs a little bit of love. So there's another tool we can use in combination with Dynamesh to make the mesh look better. That's Z-Remesher. So for this, you can kind of play with some of these settings as necessary. The big thing would be whether you want to keep the target polygons the same, half the number, or double. I'm in a nice low 4,000, so it's fine. I'm just going to click Z-Remesher without changing anything and see what we get. So what that's going to do, and you can see now it has made this a nice shape. Looks pretty good. There's still some funkiness happening there, you know. It's definitely not as symmetrical as I'd like, so maybe we'll kind of play with that too. We'll do modify topology because we want it to be symmetrical. We want the two sides to be the same, so that when we start sculpting, they're the same. So we'll do mirror and weld. Now let's do Z-Remesher. I don't love these ears. Let's do half. Run it again. And we would run it again, make it more simple. So this is what I was saying in the other program. If I spent more time making my mesh look better in Max, I have less things I need to do in here. We definitely want to probably mirror again. You know, you might get some of this weirdness here, but when I smooth it out, it'll go away. All right. So the reason again why I'm doing mirror and weld is I want it to be the same on the left as on the right. So that way when I start coming in here and modifying things, it looks the same. So make sure X is turned on. So now I can start kind of really editing this model, turning it into something a little more complex. Turning it into my horse, or my unicorn rather. So now we're just working inside of ZBrush now. But you can see, notice this again, I've got this nice horse shape here that I brought in for Max. And in Max, it was literally just a bunch of primitive objects. And now it's one model ready for me to start sculpting detail. Again, we can divide this a couple of times, add me some more geometry, and start, utilizing these tools to create our shapes. So now I would say it might work a little bit better here if got a nice picture to go off of, but we're kind of just playing with it now. So I'm just kind of using the sculpting tools. This is that clay buildup brush, and to make it go in, I can hold down Alt and it will flip to subtract versus add. So here maybe we'll draw kind of our nose, create. Maybe we want to go ahead and use our H-Polish tool. Again, if you're familiar, coming from one of the other programs, you might be familiar with using this one. Create a bit of a lip there. Now you're probably noticing again that this is pretty similar to ZBrush Core, to ZBrush Core Mini. There are a lot of the same tools, they work a lot of the same ways, but again, here we are. was thinking maybe some fur bits on the side. I don't know. So here, let's divide. And then I'm going to hold down Shift, which is my smooth tool I keep using. I'm going to make it a little bit less. So again, I'm kind of adding, I don't know why I'm giving him sideburns, but give him some nice sideburns. You know. I've never seen a unicorn, so maybe they got sideburns. That's way too strong. And probably way too big. Alright, so at this point you can kind of see I'm just really just starting to model the things. Alright, anyway, I don't want to spend too long on the sculpting tools part because this video can get pretty in-depth, right? But I want to show you that again, it's pretty easy to bring in, again, the model and work with it. What's really cool is if I like Max, you know, I can use Max to create kind of these nice shapes. You know, so if I don't want to make my base mesh in something like ZBrush, I don't have to. I can make it Max. And I can make it pretty simple. So we can see, again, I need a lot more work here. And a nice reference would be good, because, I don't know, otherwise I've got like Wolverine horse here. But coming from something like this model in 3ds Max, where we at 3ds Max, you can see we can use it to create pretty much whatever we want. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll try to make a few more of these videos, and hopefully we'll have fun with ZBrush. I'll show some more fun examples too.